right, guys, so welcome our event tonight and evening with the winners of the 2023 John E. Gruber Creative Photography Awards program. My name is Haley Page, the Exhibition and Events Manager at the Center for Railroad Photography and Art, and we are so excited for tonight's celebratory event. Please note that we are recording today's program and it will be made available on our YouTube page in a few weeks' time. You can check out this one when it's up, as well as most of our past programs there. That link is youtube.com/railphotoart. The theme to our 2023 Awards program was the role of technology. This was an expansive theme, and the judges were excited to see not only how technically skilled our submitters were, but also how creative and interpretive the photographers were with the subject. We received a wide range of submissions, and the judges narrowed the selection to the photographs we'll see tonight. I hope you all enjoy the images as much as we did, and we are really excited to hear more about the thought processes that went into the creation of these photographs. Now, before we get into our interviews, I just want to run through some quick housekeeping information and really briefly introduce the center. Now, as a reminder, we're using Zoom webinar, and that means that audience members do not have access to their audio or camera during the event, but you can change how you view the screen in that top right corner under the icon view. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a number of other icons. Please use the chat function for any comments you have during the presentation. And by selecting everyone, you'll ensure that the rest of the audience can see your comments. And please use the Q&A icon to submit any questions. Following the main presentation, we'll be hosting a Q&A session with all of our award winners. If you have a question at any point during today's presentation, make sure you post that in the Q&A, not the chat, to make sure that we see it. Well, thank you, as always, to our regular viewers for tuning in tonight, and welcome to any first-time viewers. The Center for Railroad Photography and Art is a membership-supported organization with a mission to preserve and present significant images of railroading, and we accomplish that mission through several core programs. We offer a monthly online programming series, and these cover a wide range of topics in the world of railroading. We promote these programs through eBlast and on our social media channels, so make sure you follow us on all of our platforms under the handle @RailPhotoArt. All of our online programs are free, and most are available to stream on our YouTube channel. Again, that's youtube.com/railphotoart, and this one will be posted in a few weeks' time. Our next program will be one of our members-only programs, and that will take a closer look at our David Maney collection. Our largest in-person event is our annual Conversations Conference, and that usually takes place in Lake Forest College in Lake Forest, Illinois. We are currently planning our 2024 conference, and we'll be announcing more details about that this fall. We oversee a traveling exhibitions program. The center does not maintain a museum space, but instead we partner with other institutions to host our shows. Currently, we have 6 exhibitions on display and 3 more available for online viewing. You can check all of those out on our website. We have our Railroad Heritage, which is our ad-free quarterly journal, and that's a benefit of membership. Back copies of the magazine are available on our website. And our next print publication is Rio Grande Steam Finale, which will be released in October. And pre-orders for that are available on our website now, so go check it out. And we have our Railroad Heritage Visual Archive, which is a representative collection of over 900,000 items, which are committed. We just launched our collection management system, Odyssey, where you can explore many of the images in our collection, and you can check that out at railphoto.historyit.com, and all of those links are available on our website. All of the work we do at the center is made possible by members and donations. Support from our community provides over 70% of our funding. Thank you for being our engine, and thank you to our members who commit to donating on an annual basis. You drive so much of what we do. If you're not a member but are interested in joining, get in touch with us. Membership includes access to our quarterly members-only presentations, discounts to our annual conference, and 4 issues of our journal, Railroad Heritage. You can learn more about everything we do and about how to join us on our website. That's railphoto-art.org. Now, we have been hosting our awards program since 2002, and it has gifted us with some truly fantastic photography. This year was no different. Every year, photographers stun us with both their superlative photographic skills and engaging compositional storytelling. Tonight, we are going to hear from the winners for our 2023 theme, The Role of Technology. So up first, we have Chris Walters, who is an Australian photographer with a familiar name to our awards podium. Unconstrained by any specific photographic style or camera preference, Chris thrives on unconventional endeavors. When not behind the lens, Chris navigates the management systems of transport for New South Wales and lives with his partner Claire and his daughter Sarah. His drone image of driverless passenger trains on surface lines of Northwest Metro Tagalong in Australia won him first prize in our black and white contest. Chris, do you want to unmute and come up to the stage and please tell the audience about making this photograph?
Okay, I'm just going to squeeze through the virtual tables here to the stage. And I think you can see me. And
Yep.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Just cough twice if you can't. Apologies if there's any background noise. I'm next to an open window and it's 10 o'clock in the morning here in Australia. So people are sort of out doing stuff. I've asked them to be quiet, but we'll see how they'll behave. Yeah, okay, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, can you tell us about making your photograph and how it expresses the theme of the role of technology?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is actually a real indicator of why I got a drone in the first place. I was very much out to capture textured patterns dominated by trains on rails. I was after something in this particular case that if you sort of tilted your head and squinted at it or looked at it in the thumbnail form, might look like a circuit board or something a little less. You need to actually look at it and use your imagination rather than just sort of scroll next and see what the next image might be. It was meant to be an attention getter. I'd like to think that the approach of this was actually in keeping what this subject is, which is a series of driverless trains lined up having a Sunday afternoon off. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the top two are exceedingly clean. I didn't know it at the time, but they had just come off the boat a couple of days earlier, so they're actually brand new. So I definitely planned this shot, and I'd already done a few flybys with the drone of the sort of western end of the Northwest Metro for a few weeks before this. It's an elevated line, which we don't have a great deal of here in Australia, particularly in Sydney. And it's fairly new. It only opened in 2019, and it's got some pretty amazing architecture to it, particularly a really nice bridge over Windsor Road, just not far from where this photo was taken. So it really lends itself to drones. But with this particular scene, it was part of a shopping list that I had for shooting the yard at the time. But this was top of the list, getting something like this. Obviously, you can scout something with this kind of bird's eye view with Google Maps and stuff like that really easily. You're essentially sort of looking almost like a previs, to use movie speak, of what you might get. But actually being there on the day, you can't be sure the trains are going to line up. You can't be sure that there's not going to be shadows falling the wrong way. I did choose this time of day to try and keep the shadows at kind of 45 degrees so they wouldn't be too wacky and sort of distracting. But of course, you get there and you can't be sure the trains are going to line up. Fortunately, on this occasion, they were. But the fact that they lined up in such a structured and ordered way was really what I was after. And I was so gratified to see that they'd played ball and actually, like exactly how I wanted. So that the end result was something that kind of looked a little bit unreal. That's exactly what I was after.
Yeah. So you mentioned your drone photography, and it's something that you've done quite a bit. So how has the use of that really expanded your narrative storytelling?
Look, I really got the drone for that kind of top-down view. I love the idea of taking that bird's eye view that we just otherwise can't see unless you've got a spare satellite, which I don't. And it's looking for those patterns and textures that we walk amongst, interact with every day, but can't see because we're not directly above looking down. So what I was looking for was a different way of putting the subject into context of its landscape, which was very purposely framing out any buildings, the staff car park, because there actually were human beings on site this day. They were just all inside. It was very much about making a kind of robotic, cold, detached image that just didn't look quite right in the context of a passenger train, which is all about moving people. So that was kind of the narrative of what I was after. But look, I could also, I suppose, talk about, because this photo was taken before the competition, but when the theme was announced, this image straight away leapt in my head. It was the only image I had that leapt straight into my head. And it's about, I see the role of technology is not just being about the evolutions of trains and railways themselves, but how we see them and how we capture them. how we shoot and record history is often a reflection of where history was at the time that the scenes were captured. And I'd like to, a couple of examples. Well, think back to the opening of the first Transcon in North America and Andrew J. Russell's famous East and West shaking hands at laying of last rail photograph at Promontory. It's got that classic sort of bronze, sort of not hazy, but very sort of posed, very frozen in time kind of look, because it's a glass plate image, and it speaks of its time. So it's not just about the moment that's being recorded, it's how it was recorded that also sort of gives you something about sort of what was being captured and when it was captured. And then, you know, leaping forward in time, you've got Winston Link's wonderful nighttime post scenes from the 50s in Norfolk and Western, and then leaping forward again, you've got Steinheimer's beautiful cinematic stuff from the 60s and 70s. What was happening on and behind the camera is informed those images just as much as what was happening in front of the camera. And look, for me today, it's, you know, I mean, it was interesting you mentioned at the front that I don't sort of have a particular style or particular camera that I love, and that's very deliberate, because I kind of I shoot the scene with what I think the scene needs, and obviously a drone works here, but that's kind of how we shoot in 2020 or 2023. And in years to come, I'd like to think that will help sort of give a feel for the time, the technology and the way that we use these things to record what we're seeing. You know, today, like I said, it's drones and phones, but it's also sort of what's the most notorious Instagram scene that you can go out and capture. And then I was in New Zealand recently, and there's a place called Roy's Peak near Wanaka in the Southern Alps that is, it's I think about a 4-hour walk up the hill and a 4-hour walk back through sheep paddocks. But the scene is so famous on Instagram that you actually see queues of people, so 30 or 40 people deep, waiting to take exactly the same photo, because that's what we do in 2023. And not that I'm saying I want to go and do that, but it's I just love the fact that each time period and the way we capture images has got a particular feel and style to it, just as important as what's in front of the camera.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points. Are there any lessons that you've learned either technically or artistically that you could share with the audience from your drone exploration?
Yeah, look, I probably need to at this point acknowledge Olaf Hansch's winning shot from 2016. I'm not sure if everyone here's seen it or can recall it, but it's a spectacular direct overhead shot of a steam train going through a very snow-covered forest in Germany. And that shot pretty much led to this one. Without Olaf's shot, this one wouldn't exist. And look, that was kind of the shot that sort of made me sneer less at the idea of having a drone. I prior to that, thought of a drone as kind of remote control photography, because you're not behind the viewfinder. You know, there's a detachment from it. And the lesson I learned is that if you really spend some time with the drone in the sky, or researching it, or preparing or perfecting, you really do invest yourself so much in a particular scene. It is almost as if you're virtually behind the viewfinder, and so you can connect with what you're recording. There have been times when I've jumped out of the car, thrown the drone in the air. It takes about 5 minutes to do, but I'd like to think it could be less than that. But and then quickly snap something which is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. But when I land and look at it on the computer, I don't really relate to it, because I devoted almost nothing to it other than sort of, you know, making sure the battery was charged and putting the drone up. So I think the lesson that I've learned with drone photography is it is really tough to make a really good, really powerful, really interesting photograph, purely because there is so much potential for filling the frame with just almost overwhelming detail and subject matter. I think you've got to be careful to keep it interesting. The same rules that I follow on the ground with my SLR and my phone apply in the air. It's just a different tool to get there. So if you connect with and devote time to what you're doing, you still can connect to an image, and it still will sort of resonate with you, which, you know, humbly, this photo for me does. That's why it sprung into my head when the competition was announced. But I know that on my hard drive, I've got photos which are probably far better that I don't care nearly as much about, because I didn't spend as much time planning them and executing them. So I guess the lesson is to sort of really spend some time it's hell on the batteries, but really spend some time on the drone in the air and getting it right.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are some really thoughtful insights. And I'm sure we have a lot of drone users out in the audience who will, be thinking a lot more intentfully about, how they're making images.
Yeah, it's also a lot of fun, but it's as a rewarding medium, it can be hard work, but it's worth it.
Great. Well, awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. I know you are tuning in for us from practically the future over in Australia. So we'd love if you're able to stick around for the Q&A, but if you have to get back to work, we absolutely understand.
No, that's cool. They understand. I'm booked out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Let's move on to our second interview, Blair. So since his teenage years, Blair Kooistra has immersed himself as a rail photographer. Influenced by iconic figures like Robert Hale, Dick Steinheimer, and Frederick Benson, his style mirrors the golden era of Trains magazine and has evolved through a journey of on-the-go learning. Initially a photojournalist capturing the final moments of the Milwaukee Road, his path led him to a successful 15-year career in photojournalism before an unexpected shift to train dispatching. Expanding his horizons, he integrated travel and landscape-oriented road photography, even incorporating some of his own drone techniques. His stunning photograph of a train driver enjoying a tea break at North Yorkshire Moors Railway's Grosmont Motive Power Depot in England won him first prize in the color contest. Blair, can you please unmute yourself and turn on your camera and tell us a little bit more about making this photograph?
Hello there. Am I on? Okay.
Your audio is on. If you want to turn your, oh yeah,
Oh.
Too. Sorry, you are good.
No, I'm good. Okay. All right. Well, this photo came as a result of a week-long trip to the UK. I went out with my family. We went over for 2 weeks in 2018 and loved it so much. And I steered some of our family activities towards the railways, which wasn't always appreciated, but I dialed it back and made a promise to go back as soon as I could. So I made 2 trips in 2019, both centered mainly to photograph heritage railways, the steam railways, which are a big draw for photographers in the UK. This photo was taken in the spring. 2 Canadian friends and myself went overseas, and our plan was over a week's time to hit 6 heritage railways, each among the better in the country. There's approximately 150 steam heritage railways in the UK. So, well, what can I say? It was a mix of highly planned photographs, looking through maps and what other photographers had done online. But this photo just ended up being one of these serendipitous things where you're wandering around places where the public could have access, where there's a flurry of activity at the locomotive sheds at Grosmont, and the photo just happened in front of me. So being a photojournalist by nature, and I think I still define myself that way, this picture just happened. And it was probably 6 or 7 or 8 frames of initially 3 guys talking there near the front of the locomotive, and they walked away. And then Nick Proctor, who's a volunteer in the sheds, he picked up his tea mug and took a sip. So, or is it teacup, and took a sip, and boom, there it was. The lighting was overcast, which you would expect in England in the spring. And I lucked out having a dark background for the sheds to highlight him and separate him from the rest of the scene.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more how you thought about using this photograph for the theme of role of technology?
Well, actually, I didn't even think about entering the contest until the night before the deadline came up. And but I was thinking, well, it's I entered a few years ago, so let's find a way to tie into this. So I always liked the photo, but to be honest, linking it to the theme was a bit of a stretch. But a good caption writer can link any concept to a photograph, right? So here we connect the basics of fire and water used by humans going back to the beginning of history, and move it ahead to unite with the social aspect of British society and the ritual of tea time, with Great Britain being the birthplace of the steam locomotive as well. So,
Mhm.
in fact, this location, Grossmont, had its start in 1830, just 5 years after George Stephenson first pulled a train on steel rails with a steam engine. So, one of the first railway tunnels ever built actually is at Grossmont. And this was a Stephenson project actually to link Whidbey and Pickering. So, fire and water and steam are all really linked inextricably to each other in England, because we wouldn't have an industrial England without fire and water and steam. And
Mhm.
it's great that today you can visit so many wonderful places where the heritage is celebrated and kept alive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So with your depth of experience in North American railroad photography over the last 40 plus years, what are some aspects that you noticed in your visit to the UK that were most notable from a contrasting standpoint?
Well, the railway culture is much more prevalent in the UK than in the US. I think people are a lot more attuned to the railroads, either through the history or just because of their daily experience riding trains.
Mhm.
So we don't have that in the US. And then the railways, the number of these heritage railways really keep interest up because they're always horse trading locomotives. There's a whole sub industry of heavy duty trucks that move locomotives around from one heritage railway to the next. So they're always trading locomotives around to keep to put different locomotives on different railways for these heritage weekends. So that keeps interest up. And then the railroads, these heritage railways, are really adept at marketing uh, their product. I mean, they tie together World War II themed weekends or brew pub weekends. You bring in breweries at each different station, or what else do we got? Old automobile exhibits and bus exhibits. So New Yorkshire Moors, North Yorkshire Moors Railway is, I think, the third longest railway in the country. Heritage railway in the country, of 18 miles. And they claim that they are the most popular with the most number of visitors, about 350,000 a year, they claim. Now, Nick Proctor in the photograph is one of over 500 volunteers. So they have a full-time staff of about 100, about 50 people that they hire on salary during the summer season. And then they have, about 500 or so volunteers that just donate their time. So couldn't do it without them.
Very impressive. So do you have any suggestions or recommendations to our maybe younger audience members who are just getting into rail photography as far as lessons learned and equipment and approach?
Well, I would not get too hung up on equipment. I know that there tends to be you know, a faction in the hobby where people are really, really gearheads, and that's well and fine. But um, I'm with Chris that if you can have an SLR, if you can have a digital camera and your phone and a drone, and you could each just choose the right piece of equipment for the job. But like they say, just the best camera is the one that you have nearby. So I'm finding that I'm exploring more and more with using my phone for
Mhm.
photographs. And I think that's where it's going to go in the future. We've been constantly downsizing our camera equipment, and I think the advances and promised advances with the phone technology that are right around the corner are really going to revolutionize things in the next few years.
Yeah.
So another thing also is when you're just starting out, don't be afraid to copy people's ideas, because that's a good way to learn through trial and error. I know I certainly emulated or copied or tried to rip off the people whose pictures I saw when I was growing up. And back then, you just had Trains Magazine or Railfan Magazine. You didn't have a lot of options, people whose work you had readily available that you could see. And also find a local railroad that's friendly, a short line railroad or such, or even a tourist railroad, and spend a lot of time just working that over and over and just practicing your craft of photography uh, on a local railroad. I think that always helped me out when I was a kid.
Wise words. So anyone who's looking to get into the game or looking to improve, go
There you go.
getting out there. All right. Thank you so much, Blair. We hope to hear from you a little bit more in the Q&A.
I'll be here. Thanks.
All right, let's go over to our second place winners. So Richard, if you want to hop on up, unmute yourself, turn your video on. So born in 1960, Richard Koenig holds a BFA from Pratt Institute and an MFA from Indiana University. Since 1989, he has instructed art and photography at Kalamazoo College in Michigan. Notably, his ongoing documentary project, Contemporary Views Along the First Transcontinental Railroad, resulted in multiple articles spanning from 2014 to 2022. Koenig's diverse contributions encompass publications in railroad heritage, railroad history, AA, and the quarterly newsletter of the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society. Additionally, in 2021, he played a role in the Hoosiers Lifeline exhibit, which dove into the Monon's railroad history, and the center actually did a wonderful presentation jointly with IUPI about that exhibition. Go check it out on our YouTube channel. Richard's artful still life image of the interior of the Illinois Central Gulf Yard Office in Bloomington, Indiana, won him second prize in our black and white contest. Welcome, Richard. Can you please tell the audience about making this photograph and how it expresses the theme of the role of technology?
Sure. I just wanted to say quickly, it's an honor to speak tonight. It's a thrill to be associated with the center, as well as with John Gruber, who's for whom the awards are named. To your question, I was in high school at the time and had dual interests, photography and railroads. As a student, I toiled on the yearbook staff and had a wonderful instructor, Roger Finkston, who taught us analog photography. For a brief time, I borrowed a beat up twin lens reflex camera to dabble in medium format photography as part of my learning. This image comes from that period. It's not a square, but it began as a square and I cropped it into that rectangle. Looking at slides made alongside the 2 1/4 work, I now believe this image was made in 1976. As stated, I also had an interest in railroads. This was due to the proximity of the Illinois Central branch line near our family house. I began hanging out with Ron Ponch, who had begun a railroad club and was third trick operator at this yard office at the time. Ron was a rail enthusiast and photographer and became a mentor of mine. I wrote about him and my early work in railroad heritage in 2017 in an article called Growing Up in a Railroad Vacuum. Ron certainly, really to get to your question, you're asking about this particular photograph, and Ron certainly, since he worked there, he certainly had a helpful influence on the making of this image, as it was his place of work, and writing train orders was one of his duties. While I chased trains and took photographs in the field, this particular photograph was more akin to a still life composition where objects are arranged and finessed, which would have been rare in my practice, usually. While some of my later fine artwork would have also been arranged, my work with railroads is documentary in nature. I'm a purist in that I want to have as little impact on the subject as possible. Having zero influence is impossible, of course, as the mere presence of a camera changes what is being photographed. But my goal is to have as little influence as possible, usually. So to be honest, this image is a bit of an anomaly for me in that it was finessed.
So why did you submit it to this contest? What of this photograph speaks to you about the role of technology?
Well, of course, it's a look back at earlier technology, in the railroad scene. And I'll quote from my caption. The telephone one sees here has a separate mouthpiece and headset. The radio is a typical Motorola of the time, and the train orders are handwritten on flimsy paper with carbons inserted between pages for the creation of multiple copies. These train orders would have been hand-delivered to the crew of a moving train via a wooden Y-shaped stick. So the image directly addresses technology, but one of that of 1976 rather than today. I thought it would be a nice contrast, basically. Having pointed out that it comes from 1976, and 4 years later, the Staggers Act would be passed, which would really change crew sizes and alter the railroad scene. And I think in 1986, there was a national agreement that sort of finally did end the train order in this sort of physical, flimsy form that you see here. So so when this photo was made, some big changes were nigh. One thing I wanted to add here, and it was sort of addressed earlier, is that I think it's wonderful how technology of photography has paralleled that of railroads and railroading. So the move to solid state electronics and onto digital technology can be seen in both. And a world that was analog, manually controlled, became dependent upon unseen electricity to ever greater degrees. And I really kind of love that parallel run between photography and railroads.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you mentioned this, you believe this photograph was made in 1967.
76.
76, sorry. Yeah. So, quite a few decades old, yet it still captures the authenticity of a railroad yard office. What do you see as the enduring elements of being a railroader that technology cannot change?
Well, I guess it's, the mood of the photograph is determined by light or the lack thereof. And railroading is a 24-hour a day endeavor. And I'm hoping that this view captures a sense of what it's like to be up and working at 3 a.m. I feel that analog photography in particular does a good job at capturing that inky blackness that you get at 3 o'clock in the morning. The light that is present is provided by crisp incandescent bulb over the desk. I think there was probably fluorescent lights in the room as well, but the incandescent light close in over the desk sort of overpowers that and becomes the key light. But I think that sharp light represents the focus a railroader has to have to get through the night, lest injuries, derailments, dismemberment, death occur, on their watch. So I think the light sort of represents that, hopefully.
Yes, that's great. So can you talk a little bit about your use of black and white photography versus color, which I've had the privilege of seeing some examples of both your work in, and your experience in exploring both of those?
Okay, well, going back to my situation at the time, I was sort of a broke teenager, and the school was giving me free film, so I was in yearbook class, and so I would use whatever I could get my hands on. So often that was black and white. The yearbook that I was part of did have some color images in it, but most of it, the bulk of it, was probably black and white. So also I was being introduced to medium format photography at the time, or on top of this, and so would begin with the most inexpensive film at hand. So that's why I'm using black and white here, probably. In the railroad photography scene, though, I was told by Gary Dozel, also mentioned in the article that I talked about before, that working in black and white. Oh yeah, there's a shot from the Railroad Heritage. Gary Dozel mentioned that working in black and white was a good idea, a good way to get published at that time. Not all images, now almost all images are color. Some, I remember sending some images into a book that was going to be published, and they had no interest in black and white. And I thought it was kind of a shame because of the content involved. I think plus I like black and white. So in any case, back then, black and white being published was a little more common than it is now. So Gary mentioned that it might be a good idea to work in black and white, and it might help me get published. So at the time, a lot of us carried two camera bodies, one with color and one with black and white. So that was kind of fun. After being an active rail photographer from 75 to 80, I moved to New York to attend art school. And it's interesting because in the world of fine art at that time, black and white was considered more artistic, while color was reserved for like consumer-based photography. William Eggleston had the first one-person show of color photography at the MoMA in 1976, the same year as this picture was made. But it took a couple of decades for color to really take hold in the art world. So as a result, I would say I was pretty much a black and white photographer for most of my career. And it wasn't until the turn of the 21st century that the disruption of digital technology finally would coerce me to change and accept color along with pixels. Currently, I shoot raw files, processing most into color images, but will turn some into black and white when I feel it suits a particular image based on the lighting, the weather, or if I'm forced to shoot in the midday sun when the light is kind of lifeless, I might convert to black and white and pump up the contrast to give it a little bit of life. But so I still do both, mostly color now, but sometimes in black and white.
Yeah, it's great to have the variety. And you can, from what I've seen from your photography, which we've worked together a few times now, have excellent execution in both. We look forward to seeing more of your work
Thanks.
for our projects. Well, thank you so much, Richard. Wonderful insights, and we look forward to hearing from you a bit more during the Q&A.
Sure.
All right. Well, John, we'll do you next. So with 37 years devoted to rail photography, John Troxler's work has graced the pages of Trains, CTC Board, Railfan and Railroad, and Railfan Photographer and Country magazines, as well as numerous railroad calendars. A 2020 John E. Gruber Creative Photography Award winner in the black and white category for our Connections theme. John's diverse interests span collecting railroad images, lanterns, vinyl LPs, vintage stereo audio gear. Currently a manufacturing engineer manager at Subaru, his automotive engineering career includes project design and project management. John's atmospheric image of a westbound Norfolk Southern train in Calmers, Indiana won him second prize in our color contest. So John, there you are. Welcome. Can you please tell the audience about making this photograph, whether it was a premeditated journey or a spur of the moment on one of your many journeys that you get to do through your work?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, spur of the moment and premeditated. I travel back and forth to work. It's about a 50 to 55 minute journey, and I parallel Norfolk Southern's former Wabash Railroad line for most of that journey. So I have had quite a few opportunities at certain times of the year to take some unique images that have presented themselves on my drive to work or my drive home. So, and this happened to be one that occurred for me. I use a scanner radio to keep track of the railroad radio traffic, so I know what's in the area in case an opportunity arises like this, where the weather conditions, the lighting conditions are pretty darn perfect. And this particular morning, I knew the NS 255 road railer was westbound, coming up into this area where a bridge is located. And so I stopped off on the bridge and waited for the train to come. I've shot from this bridge hundreds of times, so I knew what lens combination I wanted to use. I wanted to include the tower just because I think it gave the photograph a little bit more character, adding the tower in with the train along with the ground fog and the pre-sunrise. So, but again, it was one of those fleeting moment photo opportunities. When they come by, you have to take the opportunity up and photograph them for sure. So,
yeah, definitely. So can you tell us what you saw in submitting this photo as expressing the theme of the role of technology?
Well, there are a couple of technologies shown in this photograph. The obvious one's the radio tower. That's Norfolk Southern's communication tower there at Clymers, Indiana. And then the second one is the road railer technology, which is dying off right now. There's only 2 road railer trains left in the country right now, probably North America. One's an eastbound train and one's a westbound train on the same line. So as far as the radio communication goes, you know, radio communication has improved the safety on the railroad quite a bit over the years, but it's also had a negative effect on the manpower because with the radio usage, it cut out a lot of need for men on the ground working on the railroad. So there's been a reduction in manpower over the years with the introduction of radio communication.
So where do you find your greatest comfort in railroad photography? Out in the natural landscape, like in this image, or within the urban environment? And can you tell us a little bit about both experiences and how they inform your work?
I really like the countryside, you know, especially in the early morning or, you know, early evening. Things are usually quieter till the train comes and of course leaves. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to have that quietness out in the country. And then the train arrives and basically cancels out all that quietness for a few minutes and then it departs and the quietness is back. But I really enjoy photographing scenes like this out in the country because a lot of people don't even, some are not even up at this time of day. Some people don't realize these scenes exist during the day. So it's my opportunity, I guess, given the opportunity to take a photograph of such a scene, to share that work with those individuals that have probably never seen something like this before. But I also like photographing in the metropolitan areas too. There's not much quietness. There's a lot of road traffic, people noise, etc. But there's a lot more photographic opportunities in the metropolitan areas. A lot more variety of railroads, especially in the Chicago area. And I photographed in the Chicago area quite a bit over the years, and I do enjoy that too. But given the two, I think the countryside edges out the metropolitan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a, you know, you just feel a sense of calm when you look at this picture. It's very atmospheric, as I said. Well, thank you so much, John. We look forward to hearing from you a little bit more in the Q&A. And now we'll jump over to our third place winners. We'll start with George Hiotis. So hailing from Clark, New Jersey, George is a seasoned professional photographer. His journey began with his first picture at the Jersey Central Station at Westfield during the mid-1950s, and his hobby evolved into a professional pursuit by the early 1970s. With a profound fondness for railroads encompassing both the mechanics and human essence, George consistently seeks unique perspectives. His extensive portfolio spans diverse subjects and has graced pages of both general interest and railroad publications. Notably, he has clinched 2 grand prizes and several top placements in Trains magazine and the CRPNA photo contests. His poignant image of a tower operator at the B&O Tower, Miller Tower in Cherry Run, West Virginia won him 3rd prize in the color contest. So George, can you unmute yourself and come on up?
Hey.
There you are. And can you please tell us a bit about making this photograph?
Well, first, thank you for this opportunity. And may I congratulate my fellow contestants on their achievement. I find myself in august company. This image was a premeditated journey as part of a project to document vanishing towers. My process in making an image is to find an interesting composition. In the case of natural light, then determine at what time of day the subject is shown to dramatic effect. Under artificial light, I may use my own lighting if the existing light is too weak or coming from the wrong direction. It's really all about control of the situation. My research is done through printed matter, the internet and topographic maps. On the internet, Google Earth and Photographer's Ephemeris app are invaluable resources. When I was shooting the towers in the late 1990s, the internet was not a factor in my life, at least, and there was a lot less on it. I used topo maps to help locate a subject and to determine which season and time of day would give the best light and shadow effects. I scout primarily during midday when the sun is high and the light is less interesting. Recon time.
Can you tell us a bit about how you see this photograph as expressing the role of technology?
Well, it is the role of technology was to obsolete these towers and put these operators, out of a job. And I mean, understandably, to have 3 shifts, 365 days a year is a considerable expense. Although, they are an extra set of eyes and ears on a railroad to, eyeball a train. But the technology of computer remote control, enabled railroads to centralize train control, thus eliminating the need for manned towers. And there's nothing new about CTC, but it took quite a while to evolve. And the former B&O, which this was slow to modernize, giving me time, to document a vanishing tradition, which is so uniquely identified with railroads. The model board, to me, represents a middle step between the hand-thrown levers in this tower and a touchscreen in Jacksonville, Florida, which would result in a sudden technological jump from the 19th to the 21st century, because this tower encompassed, strong arm levers, which was a 19th century technology. It had this model board, which is a 20th century technology, and it had a computer, which is also a 20th century technology. So it was quite a contrast in technologies. And my objective in this image is to illustrate the uncertainty of Jim Vargo's future as a tower operator. And it was probably that uncertainty that drove me to do these towers, which eventually became, a 5 or 6 year project, which grew. But it really is about the human element.
Yeah, I mean, with your expansive experience in railroad photography and storytelling, many of your images include the railroader kind of in situ or in action. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your approach to image making in general and how that's changed or hasn't changed over the last 50 years?
Well, my approach to image making in general is to communicate to a viewer my interpretation of a subject. And in terms of railroads specifically, is to convey the drama of railroading, not only the dynamism, size, and speed of trains, but also, their tranquil moments, sitting in a yard or something like that. But above all and paramount in the Tower Project is the human factor, the people who keep railroads running. Technological advancement has meant a reduction in labor forces, and the towers are what I like to call the last outposts. Were about the last places where an employee was easily accessible. I mean, here's a place where a man or a woman spends an 8-hour shift totally alone. There's no management breathing down their back. Their only communication with the outside world is when the dispatcher calls and gives him directions, or when he's speaking to a train. Otherwise, he's on his own. Now, my approach has changed over the years because of the role of technology, with advancements in hardware, primarily digital photography and software, which allow me to expand my imagination. Plus my own maturity. As I've grown older, my outlook has changed. I can now return to the places of my youth, and I have, with new eyes, born of that maturity and the means to expand my vision, especially in low light. That's been a real revelation and advancement of digital photography, and it will only improve. Of that, I'm certain. I believe that now I'm limited, really not by my equipment, but mostly by my imagination, because software just seems, it expands what you can do. And as you do more, you then begin to realize that you can do more. You can do more things that are daring. Again, especially in low light, which has become more or less my specialty. My approach to rail photography is to photograph people as much as possible, whether they're passengers, workers, or incidental bystanders. I would also add that photographers, who want to advance aesthetically, not only study the masters of rail photography, such as Benson, Robert Hale, Hastings, Shaughnessy and Steinheimer, but the work of great documentarians of humanity, such as Henri Cartier-Bresson, Bruce Davidson, W. Eugene Smith, and Dorothea Lange, just to name a few. As a teen, I studied their work, and it informs my rail photography some 50 years later. Some of you may remember Eric Williams' presentation at Conversations a few years ago, in which he spoke extensively about how art informs his photography. And I think that's something that evolving photographers should really consider. It's not all about the trains, but having studied these other photographers, these photojournalists, really gave me a new perspective on how to photograph people. And to me, I'm very fond of the hardware, but the people who make it run are especially important. And lastly, I'd like to say a word about John Gruber, whose superb photography of Brevet employees, I think, has few peers. Everything he touched that I know of was of high quality. And with his ultimate and hopefully lasting legacy being CRPA. That's my 1.5 cents.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, George.
You're welcome.
Some really poignant points there. We'll look forward to hearing from you a little bit more in our Q&A.
Hey.
All right, let's bring up our last winner, Frank. If you want to come on up, unmute yourself, turn your video on. Frank Berry began his train chasing journey at the age of 4. In the late 1950s and early 60s, he embarked on extensive travels across North and Central America and parts of Europe, capturing captivating images of steam locomotives and their operators. His prolific work has graced the pages of Trains, Classic Trains, The Washington Post, Colorado Annual, and Railroad Heritage. His evocative photographs have also been featured in 23 books, including Train's 100 Greatest Railroad Photos. He's been honored with the Stint Photography Award from the Center, and his work has been showcased in several exhibitions. Frank won 3rd place in a black and white contest for his expertly photographed image of a head brakeman capturing orders on the fly from a speeding nickel plate 284 in Plainsville, Ohio in 1957. Frank, you want to come on up? Thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about making this photograph? I hear you have quite an interesting story behind it.
Well, I don't know whether it's an interesting story, but it's the only photograph like that I've ever gotten. And it was Thanksgiving vacation from my college in southern Indiana. And I hitchhiked up there because I wanted to photograph the nickel plate. And I found out from the station agent what was coming and set myself up for it. And there it is. And it was, as I look at it now, it was such an extraordinary image of how they got messages to the passing trains without stopping them. And, this would have been given from a dispatcher in the headquarters of that particular division, who would have either telegraphed it early on or telephoned it to the station agent, who then would either write it out or type it out. And this is how it was handed up to the engine crew. Actually, this is a fairly modern phase of it, because in most places when I was young, the station agent stood outside and held up a big sort of Q-shaped, no, it wasn't quite like a Q, but a sort of circular shaped thing with a long handle and a clip on the end of it. And he would hold it up, and this was much easier than that, because he had to stand in exactly the right place on the platform so that the people in the engine and caboose could reach it. This determines that it's located in exactly the right place. So there isn't that necessity to be perfect. But in the age of what we have today for communication, there were no cell phones then. And information had to be conducted to a speeding train, and this is how they did it. And today, this is just hard to imagine, because everybody has their cell phone. They can communicate with anybody else in the world with no problem. And it's all very different. But I was glad to be able to, record this, along with many, many other pictures in the 50s and 60s. I spent 4 years in Mexico. After they got rid of steam engines in this country, they sent some of them to Mexico, and Mexico ran them until I can't remember when it was late 1960s. So that's a little bit of background on this.
So when you were going to make this photograph, were you expecting to see this moment, the having the orders on the fly, or were you hoping to just get a picture of the nickel plate?
No, I was clearly expecting to see that. It's the only picture like that I have printed. I may have taken some others, but I have many pictures of them handing up a sort of P-shaped thing, that piece of wood that bends easily. I can't think of the name of it, that they'd attach this to. And in that case, they had to stand in exactly the right place and have it held up exactly the right way. But that was a standard way it was done for many years. And this is sort of automated.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you chased locomotives down in Mexico for a little bit as well. When you went out photographing for steam in particular, was there a particular style that were you looking to get locomotives coming ahead, or what were you looking for at that age when you went out photographing?
That's an interesting question. I was raised and I saw railroad magazines and trains magazines and all that. And the sort of standard picture was what we call a 3/4 view, shows the front end and this one side. And I took many pictures like that. Most of them are fairly dull, because what I realized, I'm working on a book about Mexico photographs now. I had one published about photographs in New Mexico on the Rio Grande narrow gauge. But what I realized was that the most important thing about a photograph is not just the engine, although that's the center of it, but what else I could get in the photograph besides the engine. And this is a classic example. In Mexico, there were sort of very, I had a lot of people in my pictures in Mexico, but also very scenic stone cliffs or mountains or whatever. And, I have a lot of 3/4 photographs with the train coming at you, but as I say, the best ones are things that had really other interesting things in the picture. And this is certainly one of the most interesting ones.
Really is. And we're really thankful. I believe I heard that your daughter submitted this for you. So we're really really blessed to have the privilege of being able to see this photograph. So thank you so much, Frank.
Well, thank you for showing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to end my screen share here now. See if I can do this. And Elrond, do we have some questions coming in we may want to jump into? I'd invite all of our panelists to turn their cameras back on, so we can, whatever questions have come on, we can open up to all of you.
Well, I just wanted to start off by asking Frank, I see an item, someone, Tom Gildersleeve is joining us tonight, and he mentions that you were an extensive hiker in Mexico, doing up to 25 miles a day, and that you would develop your film at night with whatever water you had available. How is that? How did that work?
Well, I think that may be a slight exaggeration. Maybe it was 25 or maybe it was 18 or 20. I don't remember. I do remember doing that. And a miraculous thing happened on that day because a freight train came by going my direction. And all of a sudden it stopped out in the middle of no place for no reason that I could see. The picture I took of the engine shows them working on what appear to be it was a Mikado, I believe, and so it had 2 wheels under the cab, and I think they had a hot box under there, and that's what the photograph indicates. So I had been walking all this time, and I was going to have to walk till after dark probably, and here all of a sudden this train stops right in front of me. And I went back to the caboose and, or maybe I rode in the engine. Yeah, I think I did ride in the engine on that one. There's other story, which I can't really tell you now, but I had a lot of amazing experiences in Mexico. Almost all the engineers let me ride with them in the cab. Some of them were honored to do so. People from the United States were sort of looked up to by people who hadn't read history about Mexico and the United States. But I did have a lot of amazing rides. There was one engineer who wouldn't let me ride, which probably saved my life because that train derailed. And the tender actually went off the track. And I was standing on the gangway, which was hinged to the back of the cab and rested on the front of the tender. And that was vertical at the end of the wreck. And fortunately, I wasn't on it. Or you might be interviewing somebody else right now.
Oh my. Well, we're glad you're here.
So am I.
Wow. I don't know if anyone has a story to top that one. Any other challenges you guys have overcome for a picture? What's a good story for any of you, for any of our award winners? Any stories come to mind?
Well, I once walked into Ruby Canyon to get a picture of the Rio Grande Zephyr in a spectacular location. And I must have walked in a mile or two and actually couldn't find anything from track level. And by that time, my quart of water was exhausted because even in October, Ruby Canyon is like a parabolic reflector or concentrator of heat. And so I decided I should turn around and walk out. And I was almost at the exit when I decided to climb up and found a good shot after all. So that was, and I was cognizant of a story Mel Patrick had told me where he had gone in there, I think without water on a much hotter day and ended up drinking river water, which made him sick, and he barely made it out and spent 2 days at least in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
all that for a shot. I don't know if he got the shot. It's all about the shot.
I hope he did.
Yeah,
Right.
Mel's nothing if not intrepid, and he's survived to tell the tale. But that was one of those, kind of almost anything for a shot days.
Mhm. Mhm.
Actually, my desiccated corpse was not found on the tracks in Ruby Canyon.
If I,
That's one thing that technology can hopefully help us all out.
I was just going to say, Haley, with regards to drones, there's places around Sydney that I used to have to walk sort of 5, 10, sometimes 20 Ks a day to get into and out of. And there's one example north of Sydney called Koenig Bank, which is sort of the major climb up from the Hawkesbury River to Hornsby and then into Sydney, and it's a devil of a climb for crews. It has been for years. And if you wanted to go in there and shoot it, you basically had to walk in from the top station, Coan, or from the bottom station at Brooklyn. Last year with the drone, I parked at the Oval in Brooklyn and sent the drone a K.5 up the hill and took shots that I could hear. The trains climbing the hill, couldn't see them except on the screen. That's what technology has done. And I will say that the shots I took that day are some of those shots that I don't really love today because they look great, but I phoned it in. So that's kind of the reverse of the sacrificial stories.
You could do a whole presentation with photographers who've had horror stories while flying drones. I mean, it opens up a whole new thing that, people walking into shots never had to worry about. It's like you put the drone up in the air and, who doesn't have a story where you're just ringing the last minute of charge out of a battery and you're like, God, I hope the train shows up. I had this in Jackson, Mississippi this year where I was waiting for Amtrak to leave the depot and I had the drone up in the air and it wouldn't leave and it wouldn't leave and it wouldn't leave. And finally I said, well, I'm getting short on battery time, so I better think of a place to put the drone down if the train doesn't leave, and I'll have to get in the car and go retrieve the drone. So I'm starting to land the thing and it wouldn't let me land because it wants to fly return to home. And I keep turning the return to home off and it keeps ignoring me. And finally the thing drops out of sight and the screen comes dark. And with the last gasp of juice on the battery, it shows me kind of this half shadowed stairway next to a highway overpass where it landed. So I get in the car and I speed up there and I get out of the car and I kind of have an idea of where it is. It's between these two overpasses. It set itself down on this stairway. And I found the drone parked at an angle on this stairway, completely out of juice. And it was a homeless encampment, but there was no one living there at the time. But I was just imagining, boy, that would have been a surprise to someone hanging out there to have this drone come in and land on.
I had something similar in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Otira Tunnel in the south side of New Zealand. It was it turned 100 a couple of weeks ago, and they had some events over there for that. And so me and about maybe about 80 people are waiting at the base portal of the tunnel for the Transalpine train to come out with the headboard on the front and everything. The problem is you don't know exactly where the train is. It's 8.5 Ks of tunnel, which is probably about 5-6 miles. The Kiwi Rail staff on site are saying it's definitely left Arthur's Pass. We think it's in the tunnel. It should be here in 10 minutes, right? Up goes the drone. Wait. Battery goes 80, 60, 40, 20. Okay, have to land. Quick, change battery, send it up again. Can someone give me some intel? Because you don't know the train's coming out of the tunnel, basically daylight. But I actually was on 26% of battery with the second battery when it happened. So I lucked out that time, but yeah, don't work with children, animals, and trains.
I can relate to that, Chris and Blair, because my drone has a stated capacity of 31 minutes of flight time.
That's good.
Send it up.
Yeah, but you're right off at least 5 minutes of that, right?
Yeah, and right. So I'm there waiting for departure, hovering, waiting for departure. And I'm watching the battery deplete. And now I have to do this calculation of, well, do I have time to bring the drone back?
Right.
Put another battery in and then send the drone back out, which is, I've done that 2 or 3 times now, is you just gamble that you waited this long. Well, if you lose it, you lose it. There'll be other shots, but it is a battery game that you play. So when the technology, quote unquote, improves, we'll be able to, fly drones for longer. Maybe somebody will come out with a solar powered drone.
That's what we need.
With a high efficiency motors. I mean, this, the newest
Methane powered.
yeah, the newest DJI drone will fly for 45 minutes.
Right. But you'll keep using, you'll put it up there till 43.5, regardless.
Yeah.
The more capacity you have on the battery, it just doesn't mean that you'll be more prudent with the use of your battery. You'll just, push it even more.
How many batteries do you guys have? I've got 5, which usually lasts me maybe a day.
I got 5, and my rule is, always be charging ABC. Always have a fresh
Absolutely.
one on the drone, 1 in the charger, and then 3 in the back.
1 in my pocket.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, before we get too lost into a drone conversation, I did have one more question for each one of you. What is either a project or maybe a subject, a railroad subject, that is inspiring you right now, or you're having maybe some special fun taking pictures right now? What is something that is inspiring you?
Look, I'm happy to go first quickly. I'm actually in the middle of a project to shoot every railway station in the Sydney region, bounded basically by the Hunter Valley, Nowra in the south, Goulburn and Bathurst. And it's not a documentary style thing. It's to sort of capture something of the station. It's more to get me there and get me to think about the scenes and the people, and even sort of what it's like to be there. So there's a real variety in the kind of scenes I've got. Some you can't even tell it's a train station. Some it's just a train station. Some it's just the people. But the idea is to visit each and every one of them, whether they're still in service or not. I think I worked it out. There's about 360, and I'm currently sitting around 240. So that's the project I'm working on at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's ambitious.
That is ambitious.
That's
Anyone else?
fantastic.
Smedley had asked what projects we're working on, and I can sadly say I have no projects right now because I get out so infrequently. The only time I really go out is when I take vacation time, and that changes. This past spring I was out for most of a week on the Kansas City Southern for obvious reasons there. But
Right.
That really wasn't a dedicated project per se, other than just saying, God, I've lived in the area for all these years and I really need to get out and see some of this stuff. There's so little that I really want to go out and see in Texas, other than maybe what I shot when I first moved out here in 95, 96 out in West Texas. And I'd like to go back and shoot that again, do that again. But locally, it's the only time I really get out and shoot anything locally is when people come from out of town and they say, hey, show me what's going on the railroad. And I take them out and, we just have a horrible day and don't see anything because I pay no attention to anything.
Oh, well,
sorry.
Or no, sometimes that works to the advantage. You get the newbie with you and then it brings you beginner's luck. And it can
that happens too. See, but Elron, we have to go down to Trona and we have to go to Plaster City. Right.
We do. This is on. I have an obligation to fill Blair's bucket list. Any
road
other
trip in the Bronco?
Yep, road trip in the Bronco. Any other subjects that are exciting you guys right now? A favorite train, a favorite place?
Speaking for myself, I have no particular obsession at the moment, other than a general one. I live in northern New Jersey, which is a hugely target-rich environment. If you're into trains, I'm 3 miles from the former Pensie's 6-track main line in Rahway. I am 3 miles from the Jersey Central, former Jersey Central, now NJ Transit. I'm 5 miles or 6 miles from the former Lackawanna, Morrison Essex division. And, there's just a huge amount of stuff. I'm not that far from the former New York Central Hudson division, which is It's very scenic, which I've been doing, I don't know, for 30 years or so. And my main focus really is stations, because especially with stations, you find people. And in modern times, virtually everyone, to a person, is using a mobile device, is using a smartphone. They don't even know I'm there. And I'm using a mirrorless camera on silent shutter. So it's very stealthy. I'm standing there with a camera and nobody pays any attention to me at all. So if you want images of people on their phones, well, they're a dime a dozen, and with the added bonus, I suppose, that, in the later hours, those phones light up their faces. And this is also rather a nice thing that I've, suddenly found. You can take advantage of that, especially with the sensitivity of digital. So, ever since the towers, I haven't been on anything, that extensive. But I just keep finding new things. I keep finding new things to shoot. What with the internet now, rail pictures, CRPA, this, that, and the other, Google Earth, and Google Earth Street View, I can now look at a shot before I make the shot. If they have driven that road, I can go there and look at that location and more or less scope it out and get excited or unexcited about it. And then it's really cool to go there and meet it in the flesh. So, this new age, and I'm very happy to have seen it, to have lived long enough to have seen it, there's just so much. And if I live to be 200, I don't think I would be able to do it all, because there are always new angles on old places to which you've been. And you go there, with open eyes, and you say, oh, I didn't see that before. Or I went with what I would call tunnel vision the first time, focused on something. But once you look around, you may find something that interests you even more. And again, this area in which I find myself living is just endlessly target rich. It just depends on, what interests you have. But there's no shortage of traffic, as you can imagine. Thousands of trains a day is not an unknown number here. Between Metro North and NJ Transit, it's colossal with scenery to match.
Wow, well, I'm excited to see more of your results, George. Richard, did you have a thought?
Well, I wanted to piggyback on that a little bit with the way technology is changing. I'm kind of interested in star photography and dark sky areas. I was looking at the Colorado and Southern, where it sort of snakes around. What is it, northeast New Mexico, in a dark sky area, and I was hoping to try to combine trains and star photography, and I haven't really spent enough time out in the field to get it done, but that's one of my interests right now. But I am kind of looking for that big project too. I spent 9 years working on the Transcontinental Railroad, and it was great, and I've kind of floundered since a little bit. So I need one last big project to work on, I think, until I retire, ideally. But it might involve star photography and trains.
Well, to kind
Nice.
of
The CNS is an amazing piece of railroad out there too. So
Yeah.
always good to go out there.
to shift focus a little bit away from a big project first, maybe a little bit more of a lifelong continuous project. We had a question in the chat talking about the importance of photographing your hometown, your hometown railroad. And if anyone tuned in for our June members only presentation about Madison railroading, this is a point that Scott really made in reflection of John Gruber's photography and the work that he did here in Madison. So can any of you speak to photography that you've done in documenting railroading around your hometown, or maybe one particular location that's close to you guys?
If I may, I think for me, that Rahway, New Jersey, on the former Pensy, would be such a place. I mean, it's 3 miles from my home. And I first went there as a kid riding a bike around 1956 or 1957. We used to drive, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 miles, a friend and I, down there. And it's 6 tracks. It's known as the 6 roads, 5 miles of 6 mainline tracks, and incredible amount of traffic. And it used to host GG1s by the dozens, and now it's Acellas and other high-speed trains in huge profusion. And when we moved to Clark in 2014, I would take my girlfriend Amy to the station so she can get the train to New York. And I looked and I said, this really isn't very interesting. But then, I went back again and again and saw that there was, there's a signal bridge there. There's a 6-track crossover. There's a tower less than a mile away, union interlocking. And there's a station, high-low platforms, glass blocks. And it became a project which I've been working on now on and off for 7 or 8 years. And what's really great about it is it's the way it's situated, the way that the light with the various seasons plays on it. In the winter, you get the sun setting almost at the end of the tracks, and you get some really great light and shadow effects. And almost every time I go there, I find something new and say to myself, why didn't I see that before? So that's more or less, it's the railroad closest to my home. And I just keep finding endless fascination in it.
Right.
How can you lose with 6 tracks, enormous amount of traffic, trains that stop there, an island platform, and great light.
Right. John, did you have any thoughts? I know you shared a few before, but we'd love to hear from you.
I know I'll tag on to George there on his comments. The area I live in is basically countryside, and the same NS Wabash line runs through that area where I live. And there's a particular area called New Waverly, Indiana. It's a really small town, probably 40 people live in it. And it sits in a small valley, and it's been formed by glacial activity probably 10,000 years ago based on the research I've done. But there's so many angles. I photographed there for probably 15 years, but the older I get, the more I'm paying attention to the light at different times of the day and the atmospheric conditions and so forth. And there are numerous angles that you can shoot from due to the elevation on each side of this valley. It's a shallow valley, but you can get some really good angles if you just look for them. And this is an area I've shot at during that time that I've never seen things before. But as the older I get, the more I'm paying attention to those things and in shooting that area, especially the light. The light makes all the difference.
Yeah, really does. Any other thoughts?
I'd just like to tag on to George, if that's all right. Sure. His message was go and look at what's local to you, but I would add to that, go back and look again. The station project that I'm working on has caused me to, I walk around these stations. I usually devote sort of at least half an hour to an hour, depending on the size of it, to walk around and look at the architraves, the pillars, the ticket machines, the windows, and I find little railway symbols from the 70s and 80s, or luggage room notices from the 50s, which are still there somehow, haven't been painted over. Or there's a little shop there where the light comes in from the side and lights up the the sort of lollies, the newspapers and so forth, and creates really a classic scene that you don't see in 2023 much else anymore. So go back and look again.
Oh, that's great. Great advice.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters and winners. We had one last question in the chat, and it was just about the process of this awards program. So every year we have a rotating panel of judges. They change every year, so we bring in different perspectives, different eyes as they look at the photographs. They look at all of those anonymously, and we keep our judges anonymous as well to try to really mix it up as much. I believe they meet several times, usually around 3, and they go through all the photos and select the winners. But with a different panel of judges, it's different every year. So that's just to answer that question.
You mean the ones I paid off are not the same from year to year?
I suppose not.
George, you're causing trouble again.
Well, again, thank you to all of our presenters and all of our winners. Truly a fantastic selection of photographs for this year's theme of the role of technology. We are stunned every year whenever we see the selection that the judges have picked. It's just, it never, the level never lessens. It only gets raised. I want to just remind everyone that this event is being recorded, and we'll post that on our YouTube channel in about 2 weeks' time. I'm posting that link right now. It's youtube.com/realphotoart. You can find just about all of our past programs there. And you can learn more about what we all do at the center at our website, realphoto-art.org. Find out about all of our upcoming programs and all the other things that we have going on. Our next program is going to be next month, September 19th. That'll be one of our members only presentations, and it'll be an inside look at our David Maney collection. So if you're a member, we're really excited to welcome you to that event. If you're not a member, consider becoming a member so you can take part in that event, as well as all of our other past members only events and all of our other benefits membership. And again, that date is September 19th. We'll be posting information about that later this week. So thank you again to all of our winners and all of our audience who've tuned in and stayed on board for the whole event. And we'll hope to see many of you next month.
Thanks, guys.
That's good. Thank you all. Enjoy all your work. Thanks for all your stories. And Frank, thanks for your stories too.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night
Guys.
and a good morning
Bye.
to
Thank you. I better get to work.
Yeah, get to work, Chris. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. I feel like I'm in good company here.
Yeah.